comes up in our next closed session, try to determine whether or not that's something the public can hear. If you have a question about that, perhaps ask the presenter during, but otherwise, if it obviously is something that the public could hear, I think it's valuable to the public to hear some of this discussion if we can on certain topics. So obviously on specific material being covered by our presenters, that falls under that confidentiality. We have to be careful of that. So. Okay, as she's picking those items up, I show the next item on our agenda is Captain Lanhair with KHP. We met some time back, didn't we, Captain?
It's been a while, but yes.
We went to the academy together, actually, in 1996. Yeah, good to see you.
That's not it.
Okay. Automated license.
While they're getting that ready, I'll tell you his presentation is going to be on license plate readers and maybe some other things, but I have received questions about the different uses for those things, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to listen to what he has to present and probably cover some of those questions, but if not, this would be a very useful piece, I think, for the public to understand, and it's great that this is an open session that they can hear the purpose and effectiveness of these items. So.
As we're getting ready, just to let the committee know, last year we had a Senate bill that came across late in this session that was dealing with the open records access to license plate reader information. It was an attempt to try and protect this information so people wouldn't be able to go out and just track others with Freedom of Information request. And I found out real quick that a lot of legislators did not understand what a license plate reader was, and that's why I requested this presentation today. Thank you.
Yes.
Jill is going to pass out copies, actually, of the bill that Senator Peterson was referring to. Are you ready, Captain?
I'm ready.
Go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing us to come this morning and talk about the automated license plate readers. So what is a license plate reader and how do they work? So the license plate reader is actually just a camera system that photographs what it perceives as a license plate and then interprets that image and converts it into a license plate number. That number is then compared to, we say a hot list, but it would be a list that's in the national NCIC, like that's entered as a stolen vehicle or wanted or law enforcement contact for some reason. It compares it to this hot list and sends alerts with a photograph of the vehicle or the tag to the users that the wanted vehicle just passed through whatever the given location is. The ones that we have on the Kansas Turnpike are all mounted systems, mounted on bridges. However, there is options where you can put them on a vehicle as well. These reads are stored in a secure law enforcement managed server. The reads are shared with other agencies based on a memorandum of understanding that must be done with the Houston HIDA, which is handled through the DEA. Access to stored data is protected by the system and the policies of the certain agency that has the license plate readers. After the camera reads the tag, it captures that data and transmits it to the Criminal Justice Information System, which is what I said also is NCIC, to CJIS level secure servers that are located at Houston HIDA. The data is held for 6 months and then deleted with no retrievability. An audit tool allows administrators to track any inquiries that are made by any users just to make sure everybody's complying with policies. Open records requests must be received by the Highway Patrol. We then consult with Houston HIDA whether or not the data is protected from release, which would be for a law enforcement investigative purpose or something of that nature. This is a image or a picture of what that read for a user who logs into the system and is monitoring, waiting for an alarm to pop off. This is the actual, what the image looks like that you get of the vehicle. So on the top left, it shows kind of a map of where it's at. Again, ours are all fixed. This is just an example. And then it has an image of the plate and then an image of the car. Now, nighttime reads, obviously, you're gonna see maybe 2 taillights and maybe you may get a little bit of a reflection of something in the middle. But so the vehicle is obscured in the night. Then as you go down, some of them will say location, then it has the date and the time of the read. So who can access the system? Our system is used by KHP, requires authorized vetted user to enter their username and password access. So it's not something that's just open. Anybody can go in and look and see who went through the tag reader. It has to be someone that's vetted through our policies. Accessing the stored data or the tag reads requires a valid law enforcement reason. There are levels of access that are based on the users of the role of the users of the system. Agency policy and the Memorandum of Understanding regulates the use of the data and dissemination of the data. So ours, for instance, our agency, you're only allowed to use it for a law enforcement purpose. You can't run it for different purposes or personal reasons. And that's what the audit tool helps us with. The audit feature allows the administrators to see any activity based on any user, any date that they ran something, or any plate. Before a search of a specific plate number is conducted, the system requires the user to give a reason for the search. Policy then decides what is a valid reason for the search. So a case number or a reason that you're running a query. So how does this help law enforcement? Searching past reads can help conducting investigations. It allows you to find the location of, for instance, a victim's vehicle. Could change the date, time, and location of the last known sighting of a missing person. Providing investigators with photos of an actual suspect or a wanted vehicle. Obviously, the readers that we have they read from the rear of the vehicle, so the suspect is not something that's normally captured. It also alerts users of a wanted vehicle in real time. Apart from alerting users a wanted vehicle has just passed a tag reader, the data can be used to track license plate numbers, which are involved in classified and restricted investigations. A case example, this one here. In this case, we used a historical data search and found a homicide victim's vehicle that was being driven through Kansas by the murder suspect. At that time, it had the live kidnapping victim in the vehicle. The photograph, the LPR system notified troopers who located the vehicle, even though the plate had already been switched. So he went through the tag reader and then a few miles away, pulled over at another town and stole a different license plate. But our people were already watching because they had the image. They were already watching for the silver SUV. And so when it went by, they turned and went and looked at it and noticed, well, it has a different tag on it. But everything else matched. And if you look Like a lot of these, you'll see a sticker on the back window, or you may see it's missing a hubcap, or it's got bumper stickers, or a big antenna, or a box on the top that helps identifiable features. This suspect was arrested. In another case, it was used to confirm an alibi in a homicide case. And once this person had been arrested and in custody for several months, the tag read was not found in that case, and murder charges were actually dropped in part due to the information in the LPR system. So this case, example 3, is a little longer, but well, now I see that all this information I'm turning to is right in front of me. So in August of 2016, which we actually put these online in July of 2016 on the Turnpike, a month later, we had a report of a juvenile female that was being transported from St. Louis, Missouri, down to Wichita for sex trafficking purposes. Was texting her family that she was being taken against her will. She didn't know where she was at because she was in another state, and obviously the suspect was there with her. Law enforcement was tracking, they were pinging her telephone. By pinging the location as it traveled down the turnpike. Though we had no car description and the girl was not knowing her exact location, pings were several minutes apart behind the actual location of the vehicle. So there's a little bit of a delay on that. One of the pings put the girl near one of our fixed LPR sites on the turnpike. About an hour later, this victim's phone is pinging, put her in a several 100-yard radius in Wichita. At that point, we sent personnel to the area. A trooper drove the area checking license plates just to see if any of these tags matched anything that possibly went through this reader around the same time that ping happened. And actually, the first tag we checked had been through within a few minutes of around the same time of that ping. She was recovered and returned to her family. The house that she was taken and was being held in appeared to be set up as a sex trafficking house. No closing personal items. Majority of the furniture was not for the purposes of being in a home. It was more all beds and that type of stuff. And then included in the PowerPoint there, I believe you guys had a copy, but as a article about the charges of the suspect of that case. And that's all. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Certainly interesting, all the cameras that are coming out right now, especially on the autonomous vehicles, the semis. I have a brother in Arizona that always shares with me the self-driving trucks and how prevalent they're becoming.
Yes, sir.
And they have a lot of cameras.
Yes, sir.
So in the future, are you going to be able to access some of that technology on those certain vehicles on the highway? Are they going to have an option to share that information with you? I know they had an issue with those trucks being shot at, and they were able to use the ping technology to locate those shooters, and that's pretty well been stopped as a couple of people got prosecuted.
I'm not really sure down the road what that holds. I know we've had, which would be a little bit similar to what you're saying, for instance, collisions or any on-the-road incidents. We've had many truck drivers and even a lot of passenger vehicles that have, they've just bought and personally installed cameras in front of their vehicles, and we've used those as evidence for things.
One more question. Yep. So the technology, once again, we're on this technology deal with the age. That technology you're using is already 5 or 6 years old. Actually, the technology is older than that, but you've had it that long. Do you have a plan in place to update that and expand that?
Yes, great question. So right now, we don't have a plan to actually replace them. However, we have purchased their extended warranty that annually we can purchase, and it's based on per camera that they will cover anything that goes wrong with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. And you know, I think part of your question there on how that information might become available in the future, right? So anytime technology changes, there's always that option that information is sitting out there during an investigation. Of course, you can't just go out and demand it, right? You're going to have a search warrant to get that off of a independent company's truck or whatever if they have that information signed by an independent magistrate. It's not something we can demand normally. So we'll see how that changes, though. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You know, I recognize this technology as a force multiplier in terms of the number of eyes on the scene. It really, when you're trying to find a suspect and put together the information in a real-time way, like in an Amber Alert, it's unbelievably valuable. And I absolutely appreciate that and have to support the technology just for that purpose. And I appreciate the senator for bringing this to our attention in the Transportation Committee when he wanted to protect the people's privacy, not have other citizens trying to find information about the whereabouts of other citizens arbitrarily. However, I mean, I do have some concerns. I just want to bring it up to the committee. It's also scary to have the government, let's just call it the big scary government, or let's just say that there were some bad apples in the forest that were looking for patterns of behavior to find the crime that somebody is potentially doing, or put themselves in people's ways to basically target individuals along the way and profile folks in unfair ways. And I think when the ACLU came out and said, hey, look, we have some concerns about this in terms of not having access to the information, at least from an auditing perspective, I think the key piece of what I brought away is that auditability. It needs to be ironclad with some kind of transparency to even an outside audit group somehow, just to ensure the integrity of the force and to make sure that we can continue to utilize this technology for the purposes as force multipliers to stop the crimes, especially the tragic ones like the ones that you brought up that we prevented. So I still have concerns on that front. I'll just bring that out to the committee.
Very good. Senator Peterson.
Thank you. And the data that's sent down to Houston, that has to be ks.gov compliant. It can't just be sent as an image.
Right, it's all ks.gov, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Painless. Thank you for the information.
Thank you for your time.
All right, our next presentation is also open. Major Eric Sauer with KHP. This will be part of our statutory requirements and overseeing funding from the federal level for Homeland Security, KSA 46-3301. Thank you, Major.
Set up here, I have a PowerPoint too. Right here, need. Move this.
Yeah, I agree. You can actually move it down beside it if you like.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. Do I just advance it with this or this? Middle button. This one. Okay. Good morning. My name is Major Eric Sauer. I'm with the Highway Patrol, and it's a pleasure to be able to present to the committee this morning. So thank you. I'm going to give you a very high level, very brief presentation on the Homeland Security funding from the Homeland Security grant, which for our part that we are involved in. The patrol's been the state administrative agency for the Homeland Security grant for approximately 20 years. The Homeland Security regions are divided into 7 regions in the state, and there's a governing council made up of local volunteers from various disciplines that participate. The patrol, as the SAA, is responsible for the pass-through and the oversight of these funds from the grant. In 2020, we received approximately $4.1 million in DHS appropriated funds. This award is distributed among the 5 subrecipients to be allocated across the state to implement investments that build, sustain, and deliver core capabilities through planning, equipment, training, and exercise activities. In the calendar year of 2020, it was difficult being able to provide in-person training and exercise activities, however, because of the virus. Many were canceled and offered, but some were offered virtually. Also, during the 2020 year, funding was used to secure and sustain several state projects, which is one of the things that we need to talk about as far as the grant being used by the state. One of which is the patrol actually funds a fusion center analyst to work in the KFIC and the Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center. That's just one of the examples where we use some of the funds for the state. We also additionally use some funding to sustain radiation detection and identification equipment to assist other state partners in detecting, locating, measuring, and identifying radiological sources. So to dive into the PowerPoint, it's important for me to explain the process a little bit required by the Homeland Security grant for funding and how we reach the approved funding phases. There's a senior advisory council, which is a grant requirement made up of regional chairpersons, which are selected at the regional level, the representatives from state and private partners to include faith-based, tribal, health and medical, fire, law enforcement, and other first responder agencies. The THIRA and the state preparedness report are used. It's an assessment. It's a threat hazard identification risk assessment in the state preparedness report that is used to develop projects to be funded by the Homeland Security grant. Any project has to be tied back to the THIRA and the SPR for it to be allowed to be funded by the security grant. This information can also help the regions and the state prioritize funding to their highest gaps. So what they're looking for are gaps in our core capabilities across the state. The grant year is typically 3 years for performance period. We typically have about 60 to 80 projects at any one time, as you can see on that slide. And currently the unit is managing 8 open programs, which brings the total to about $25.5 million in resources across the state. %, of the funding must be passed through to the local units of government, while 20% passes through state agencies. Failure by a recipient to propose investments and projects that align with the 5 priority areas and spending requirements will result in the recipient having a portion of the funds, up to 30%, placed on hold until they provide projects that significantly align with the national priority areas. Total, at least the minimum percentage identified above of total CISHIP and WASI funds. 25% of the funding goes to law enforcement, and that's due to the 2006 Homeland Security Act or the Section 2006 of the Homeland Security Act of 2002. I've included some slides just to give you a brief overview of some of the funding and where it's being invested at. You can see cybersecurity is one, preparedness, citizen core, and some of the breakdowns of the funding. This is for fiscal year of 2020. Should have some more of these slides that kind of give you different breakdowns. There are 32 core capabilities that FEMA and DHS have in their grant guidance for us to be able to fund and use the THIRA to fill those gaps. Here's the funding core capabilities of 2021. One of the core capabilities is cybersecurity, one of the 32 core capabilities. And last year, I believe it was, the federal government, the administration, the presidential administration, instructed DHS that one of the main drives would be cybersecurity, and that has filtered down to our state as well. So there's a big push for using more of the funding for cybersecurity projects across the state. Of course, that was derived from the national THIRA. They looked at the gaps across the country, and that was the biggest gap that they felt like was a threat that could be assisted with the Homeland Security grant funding to the states. Here's some physical resources overview of just a brief snippet of items that we've invoiced and reimbursed through the grant funding. There's so much more paperwork I could give you. I had 52 slides and I pared them down to these. So there's just a plethora of information out there if you find that you wouldn't have a need for it. But this is kind of the funding purchased in preparedness equipment over the last 10 years. You can see that it runs the gamut. Quarterly reports are required until the projects are complete. So we keep those all on record in our office. The final slide I have for you is just the names of the people that do the heavy lifting in my Homeland Security office. Captain Justin Bramlett is the troop commander over the unit. Lieutenant Edna Cordner, she's our Homeland Security grant guru. Lieutenant Josh Weber assists with the grant. He also handles our emergency preparedness side of things. And Melanie Lawrence is also a Homeland Security emergency operations assistant. She's a civilian in the unit that helps us out with that. So that's our very brief, light overview. Welcome to take any, I'm here to take any questions if you have any. And I can get you more information if you need it.
Committee, any questions? There's a ton of information here.
This is just scratching it, I'm telling you.
I'm trying to digest it myself.
If you ever want to stop by our office and take a look, we have one wall that's just full of project books. It is a sight to see.
Very good. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this presentation and all you do for the state, of course. When you look at the budgetary items in this, you just remind me, who kind of makes the decision on how this gets divvied up?
Okay, so
And we saw that, I mean, I see how you have the thing broken apart regionally, and then I have the different focus areas, and then we have the different projects for 2021.
it's a pretty long process. I spent 5 years in this office, and it's kind of almost an ever-changing process. But the main thing is that we get grant guidance from DHS, and they list these core capabilities, and they rank them, and they use the THIRA, and they use our THIRA, the state-level THIRA, to come up with what they want to drive. So then we go out and we have meetings with each of the 7 Homeland Security regions and their councils. They decide what kind of projects they want to bring forth, and they all vote on them. And while they're voting on those projects, and they're all presenting each of their projects, they have to keep in mind that 25% of that has to go to a law enforcement related side of it. So it's almost like a game show. We have a big screen up there. They're trying to meet these levels, and they all have their projects, and they prioritize their projects to what that region feels like is the biggest necessity in their region. And then they bring it to the SAC, the big council, and that includes the tags folks in KDEM. And then we all decide as a big group, yes on this project, no on that project. And then we, I'm sorry, sir, we as the patrol have to then look at the project, and our job is not to design or push initiatives. That's the tag side. We simply look at the project, make sure it conforms to the grant guidance and that it is allowable under the grant, and then we can release the funds.
I bring that up just because we had the cybersecurity task force meeting, and we still have further meetings, and we've come out with some recommendations. But I do think we probably had an oversight, and not an oversight as in legislative oversight, but a misstep of not bringing into the process a recommendation to engage with this particular process to help the state understand how it can strategically work with each of those 7 different regions and help them prioritize some of that cybersecurity piece. So it's great that you brought this to our attention, and I can bring that back to that committee just to kind of continue that conversation there.
Senator, that would be so helpful for us that the regions hear from you all as well, because it really is a big group effort. And the more that the regions understand that, it makes everybody's job easier, and it fills the gaps that are out there a lot more.
The only other insight is that I looked through some of this things, scanning through it as you went through this, was that only $12,000 was spent in the Northeast on supply chain security. That's a field near and dear to my heart. And I see with the different attacks that have happened on different supply chains and different conduits and other things like that, I anticipate that we might be looking at that across the state and understanding where we might be a piece of that chain that brings goods and such beyond agricultural security, but the actual movement and other kinds of key infrastructure that helps supply the world with food and all the other things that we do. So, anyhow, thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great presentation this morning. And I'm glad you consolidated a lot of things here. But as I was looking at your physical resources overview, the air/patrol boat, the nice, it kind of triggers something as far as water safety, water patrolling. Fish, who handles that? The fishing game, and you guys interact with them when there's an issue?
Yes, typically, I'm sorry, sir. Typically, they, Wildlife and Parks, they are part of this, but it can be locals as well, without going through and visually looking at that project and seeing who's involved in it. Sometimes it's several agencies that are involved in that, if that's what your question is. But we would directly coordinate with the project manager, whoever's in charge of that project. And that is typically whoever the council deems is going to run that project. Now, to run that project, sometimes it's like not it, because they're also responsible in the future for the sustainability of that project. So let's say it's an airboat, like you mentioned. A county may not want to be the project manager, or have one of their employees be the project manager, say like the sheriff, because in the future they may or may not be able to use Homeland Security funds for the maintenance of that boat. It may fall back to the region itself or that county that has it. We've ran into that issue before. It's better now. We can use some Homeland Security funds for the sustainability and maintenance, but when you're talking sustainability and maintenance, I'm not just talking about actual equipment and upkeep. Sometimes it's warranties. It can be a plethora of things, but sometimes Wildlife and Parks, let's say as a state agency, might be a project manager. One that I can think of is they had search and rescue, water rescue suits, and they were the project manager for that. So we helped them. We worked directly with them on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions. So right now, we're counting on all these grants to come from the federal government to sustain it. What are we going to do in the future for sustainability? How much money is it going to take in the future, do you think, to keep us up to date?
I really can't answer that, sir. I mean, the Homeland Security grant is great. It's not nearly the amount of funding it was when it started. It's much smaller. I mean, right now, each year, it's approximately anywhere between $3 and $4 million, and that's not very much. And when we're talking about cybersecurity, as you were talking about the technology, even if we used all the grant money to benefit cybersecurity, there's no way we could protect the state on $4 million. So again, that's why we use the regions to prioritize, and they have to decide where the best place to put the money is.
So a follow-up on that, if I may. So in my area, we're seeing an unbelievable amount of drones flying everywhere. Are you going to be able to tap into some of that opportunity with security to obtain footage from those drones for security, do you think?
Well, it depends on who owns the drone. If it's a government entity.
We don't know.
Yeah.
They're just flying around.
If it's a private citizen and we know who they are, there's two ways to get that. It's a court order, a subpoena, or a search warrant, or by consent. We can ask them for it and they can provide it to us. So that's really where we're limited to by the courts.
I hope the local counties probably have a better handle on that than about anybody. I hope you can get them involved. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Peck.
Thank you.
Had a question asked of me, and I was looking through the agenda, so it looked like Homeland Security may be the only place to ask this question. As far as the facility, the NBAF facility, does that fall under your purview at all, or is that federal entirely? Or because there's a lot of concern in rural areas about the agriculture security.
As far as the Homeland Security grant or Homeland Security office, no, it does not. We do work with NBAF on certain security issues through the Fusion Center with our analyst, and obviously that's within one of our troops, Troop C, so we do coordinate with them, but it's really not, it's mostly federal, I would say, 99% federal.
You say 99%?
I don't know for sure, I'm saying we have very little to do with NBAF.
Significantly federal is where you...
Yes, significantly federal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Apologies, Senator. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Major. Appreciate your presentation.
If in the future, if we do this again, please let me know if you want more information or less, because I've got a whole bunch.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Looks like we have a few minutes before our next presentation.
Okay. Felt like everyone was looking at me.
Me and all right, we took a little bit of an unofficial recess there, a little bit. As we move into this next session, it will be a closed session. We have a list of folks who will be allowed to remain. Keep in mind, committee, what I said earlier about if during the presentation you end up with a question that could probably be discussed in public, why don't we allow that to happen when we come back to an open session rather than during the close? But obviously, if you have a question about whether or not that is critical information that or confidential information, then we'll go ahead and deal with it in the closed session. All right, our presentation on state facility security, Dr. D'Angela Burns-Wallace, Secretary of Administration. And then if you have individuals that you are going to have in the closed session, if you would list them for our staff so that they can put them down officially. They've been submitted? Very good, they have it, all right. All right, so Vice Chair, do you have the motion ready?
Do not have the time that you need.
Yeah. How long do you suppose your presentation is going to be? 30 minutes? Why don't we be safe and we'll set it out 35 minutes. And if we do that by the time I have on my desktop or laptop, we're looking at 12:05 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the open meeting of the Joint Committee on Kansas Security be recessed for a closed executive meeting pursuant to KSA 754319A to discuss matters related to security measures that protect state facilities pursuant to KSA 754319B12C, because such discussion of such matters in an open meeting would jeopardize such security measures, that the committee resume the open meeting in room 582 north of the State House at 12:05 p.m. And that this motion, if adopted, be recorded in the minutes of the Joint Committee on Kansas Security and be maintained as part of the permanent records of the committee.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ranking member seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are in executive session. Captain, if you could flip that switch to shut that door and help us out, thank you very much. It always takes a minute for it to close.